So Enter the Burn started essentially as a solo guitar piece. And I was looking to write something that was almost similar to like a Bach invention, you know, but I wanted to add some more jazz and fusion elements that are more indicative of the way that I like to play, you know. When I finally finished writing the song, of course I liked it, you know, but I said to myself, you know, it's a shame just to confine this thing just to a solo guitar piece. So I ended up writing this sort of like contrapuntal background line so that I could play it in a duo setting with another guitar player. And I got together with a friend of mine and we did that. And of course it sounded great, but I always felt that, you know, the song in general had something more to offer. So one day I was in the studio and I decided to record the melody. I cranked up an amp, you know, put on a ton of distortion, and I recorded it. And I listened back and it sounded good. So I added a drum machine, sort of like a, you know, straight up four to the floor rock type of groove, added some bass, added like this crazy crushing wall of power chord guitars in the background. And I listened back to it and I was like, this is it, you know, this is the deal. The song is finally starting to reveal what it really wants to be. You know, the whole process of writing a song in general is pretty involved. I mean, you know, and there are certainly challenges involved every step of the way, but for this song in particularly, the biggest challenge was not necessarily writing or recording it. I mean, that was hard too, but it's really just physically playing the song on the guitar. It's just a very challenging, kind of cumbersome melody to play. You know, and it's funny because a lot of classically influenced kind of linear melodies, like you'll find in some of the Bach pieces and Paganini pieces, are not necessarily difficult to play. It's really about the tempo, you know? Playing it at like 100 BPM, you know, I think any accomplished player can play a lot of those pieces at that tempo, but once you start to push it to like, you know, 16th notes at like 150, 160, or God forbid 170 or above, that's when, you know, I think for guitar players who can play, you know, the amount of people who could play it at that, it starts to kind of plummet off the cliff, you know. So it took me a while before I really felt like I could do it justice. You know, playing it live is not really the biggest issue. It's recording it that's difficult, because anyone who records a lot of music knows that you have to be super precise in that realm. You know what I mean? Like, the recording process itself really illuminates every possible flaw that could potentially exist. Yeah, man, I mean, I've always been a fan of the two guitar thing. I mean, it's like a thing with me. It's like, I love everything from Angus Young and Malcolm Young playing in AC/DC, but I also love, you know, Pat Metheny and John Scofield playing on the album I Can See Your House From Here, which I think is one of the greatest albums I've ever heard with two guitars. So, you know, on this track, my good friend Norwood Pearson and I, we play all the guitars on the track. So when you hear the melody, it's actually he and I playing it in unison. When it comes to the solo section, he takes the first solo and I take the second solo. You know, Norwood's one of those guys that whenever I write something that's virtually impossible to play, I can always count on him to come and play it with me and nail it every time. You know, he's got great technique, but he's also super creative and tasteful at the same time. So in terms of the production, it's kind of interesting because Grammy Award-winning keyboardist and producer Jeff Lorber and I were right in the middle of recording this like fusion-y jazz funk type of album when I wrote Enter the Burn. So even though we hadn't finished the album yet, I was eager to get this song recorded as like a side project. And it's funny because I remember thinking, what is he going to think when I send this to him? You know, because it's so like out in left field. It's like, you know, Bach meets Pat Martino meets Yngwie Malmsteen. So I said, maybe I'll call him first. You know, make sure like I can just kind of preface it before I send it, you know. So I called him up, told him about it, and he was like, yeah, man, just send it over, cool, you know. So we ended up getting Gary Novak to play drums, who, if anyone knows Gary, he's like one of the greatest session players in the world. He's played with, you know, everyone from George Benson to Alan Holdsworth to Chick Corea. We ended up getting bassist Ben Shepherd, and he was really a treat to have on this because there were some phrases that really needed some intense playing, and he really kind of shined through. And of course, you know, what can you say? You know, Jeff Lorber is a legend at this point in music, having been involved in so many different types of stuff, from, you know, jazz to fusion to pop and rock. So having him play keys on this was really great. You know, the icing on the cake was the string arrangement that was written by David Mann. So after I got the original mix back, it sounded good. And when I say mix, I mean more of the orchestration. So it really hadn't been actually mixed. It was just sort of like a rough, you know, mix, just to understand where we were at in terms of the orchestration and everything. And it sounded good, but I said to myself, like, wouldn't it be cool if we could like almost add like a symphony behind this? So we called up David Mann. He said, absolutely, send it over. And he ended up writing this string/percussion piece behind it that really helped shape the sort of emotional trajectory of the piece that really took it over the top. So my absolute favorite part of this song is the last 8 measures, without a doubt. You know, where the guitars are playing the melody and the strings are rising and building until it eventually, you know, comes to this rising like emotional climax, almost like it's like a train like barreling down the tracks, you know, and derailing, you know, right at the end. Very cool.